I have with us today Tim Mikhelashvili, and he's has a company called Amadea Pharma, but there's a lot of things he does with that to improve the whole health sciences scene. Tim, I know it's been a journey for you. Could you tell us a little bit about your life journey that got you to the point where you've got Amadea up, you've had it for a few years, and what you're accomplishing with it now and what your goals are? And tell us a little
Sure.
bit about your story.
Sure, absolutely, Mike. Glad to be here with you today. So I've spent 18 years in pharma and biotech, have a pharmacology training. But before I knew about pharmacology and healthcare, back when I was a child, I was fascinated by performance, sports performance in particular, athletes. I
Oh,
followed all kinds of sports, not only those that are mainstream. And I seemed to always wonder about where does performance really translate into statistics and success as well? How does a particular rating or a decathlon really differentiate those top tier athletes from the others? And so looking at my career, having spent years in both large global pharmaceutical companies as well as specialty rare disease companies, and seeing both successes and failures, regardless of the next generation products,
nice.
I also started to kind of reflect and think about why it was that healthcare professionals, or the medical division in pharma and biotech across life sciences, are usually considered as a cost or as utilization rather than an investment, right? Or why it was that we believed in the ultimate purpose that we had in improving, prolonging, and saving patient lives. However, I never met anyone who was excited about metrics, how they were measured. Okay, so because the way we were measured in this medical field, which doesn't seem to generate revenue, is inaccurate or inconsistent and also irrelevant to our real contribution to the overall success of the organization. And also, I had seen that it wasn't just the attributes of the product that predicted success and what we did to innovate, but it was how we communicated amongst each other within medical, with other stakeholders, with marketing, with commercial. And that's when I started this transformation, this personal transformation about 5 years ago. So the last 5 years of my career, I've spent on studying organizational change.
Ah,
And because of the experiences and because of my observations, and when I formed Amadea Pharma, I thought, look, if I change from being an employee to being an entrepreneur and an owner and a founder of my own company, I have to do something that doesn't feel like work. And for me, combining sportsmanship with a scientific method really describes my journey. And I think those are two of the most productive mindsets to have in any organization, regardless of any previous sports or scientific training that you have. And so at Amadea Pharma, I've turned what has largely been a taboo topic within medical organizations, quantifying our direct business impact as a medical division, for example, or as healthcare, right?
mhm.
Healthcare sector on the overall economy, into a treasure, right? A treasure, and applying data science principles, basic data science principles to performance management. And so I've built quite an interesting, I would say, an intriguing kind of identity with my company, with my brand in the last 5 years. Have advisors from MIT, McKinsey, Olympians as well, and my team, global medical directors, and also commercial leaders, global leaders from commercial and marketing within pharma, for my advisors. And now I have just hired a chief growth officer as well, who's worked on healthcare systems internationally, and have statisticians and and analytics experts, in order to be able to quantify our impact, communicate the business impact, and transform what has been largely seen as a cost into an investment and into a into a more direct measure of business and profit and revenue from medicine. So I'm very interested in increasing the investments in healthcare, but also improving the efficiency of those investments as well on a global scale.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a couple of questions about it. It sounds like big data and analytics is a great part of it, but at the same time, it looks like engagement and visibility and getting different companies and decision makers together to be on the same page. Is that kind of the direction, or could you explain a little bit more for me?
Yes, I think you picked up on really that how, the how we communicate with our stakeholders, and not only what we do to, detect cancer earlier, for example, or to use AI to discover new medications and repurpose old drugs, right? It's really about combining the customer experience with the employee experience that I think is
Oh,
unique about our approach, what I call a deep metrics approach, because our metrics approach really crosses over performance and behavior, crosses over metrics and culture, and crosses over medical and sales as well. Right? So, we have a, a model or a framework that ultimately quantifies activities from medical professionals from our healthcare community, right, in order to be able to increase the quality of care, to distribute accountability both internally and externally evenly, in order to stimulate continuity of care. Ultimately, right? If we're able to do it in our organizations, communicate between medical and sales in a real-time manner in this age in which data is exposed, right? You can't really
yes,
hide from data anymore, right?
right.
That's the ultimate mission, right? To increase quality, as I mentioned, continuity of care. And then the third part is if you reward performance and behavior equally at 50% each, that's the best formula to create learners, competitors, and leaders that will ultimately also accelerate innovation and the delivery of innovation in healthcare. So those are three parts of the overall mission of Amedea Pharma.
Yeah, that sounds like opening up the communications so that within and without, it's understood. Things are understood in a way where everyone's moving into innovation and making it happen. I think it's a contribution type of thing that I'm trying to say. Is people are contributing to making it work, and you have to have open communication. Is that true? Is that how it works?
I think so. I think you hit the nail on the head because that's the communication part of the work is basically what determines how quickly we have access, our patients have access to care, how quickly we can make innovation happen. Yeah, right. So
Right.
um, yeah, yeah, to your point, uh, it's not just the big data right here. You have to be able to present some kind of certainty, throughout any pandemics, inflations, or crises that happen, right? And in a transparent manner, right? Communicate transparently in a time where you can find any information in any given moment. In healthcare, we contribute, about 1/5 of the GDP, in the United States.
Very true.
Is
That's
actually
right.
right. Yeah, and in terms of the drugs and the new treatments, they only make up about 8% of the healthcare utilization, as it's called. But the patients are also well informed, but they're misinformed at times. And there's data from the Edelman Index, global data from 10,000 patients that shows that they're not as confident in their own decisions, despite having so many new ways to communicate and find medical information, for example.
I think things will settle down a little bit after this COVID run of how the government worked with pharma and how we can iron things out to be more transparent and give people more hope than fear.
I think so. I think there's a lot of different variability at stake, in terms of how do you increase the affordability and access to care
Oh,
without
yes.
slowing down the innovation? Because a lot of is it new next generation treatments, they're quite expensive. Cell and gene therapies, top 20 pharma companies how to have most of them, 90% of them have a cell or gene therapy in their pipelines, but they cost a lot, they cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we're, as I mentioned, we're treating cancer at its earlier stage. However, now the government has passed the law, the Inflation Reduction Act, that is decreasing the negotiation power of pharma and biotech, and that will lower drug prices and will allow those who have Medicaid, for example, have access to mainstream preventive medications, a list of 150 medications that will only cost $2. So I think that's a good trend. However, at the same time, it shouldn't be an or, it should be an and, right? And we should probably find ways to quantify our impact and contribution to the overall success of our organizations and overall impact on the economy in order to be able to demonstrate efficient spending of our resources as well as more timely communication, and more targeted communication of what patients really demand and how can we connect them to clinical trials, quicker. And in order to turn around, to shorten the cycle of R&D, which is the largest component
Yeah,
of drug development. So,
it's years and years of it, and the costs are just keep climbing. So there has to be some kind of a gain in efficiencies. Hopefully, AI is used for that and discovery. Uh, that's certainly maybe a game changer to help with efficiencies. But it sounds like Amadea, what you're doing in consulting with other companies and getting them more transparent, more communicative. This is cutting down the wasted time. It's like cutting through a layer of bureaucracy to get people to connect and contribute, and actions get taken at a much faster pace than that is not out of the ordinary, but could actually just be done and still come up with some fantastic new drugs that make life better. How do we balance that if you're actually making it easier for patients to afford things through their insurance and through government programs versus the type of money that it takes to actually bring something to market? If you can cut the costs of bringing new items, new drugs to the market, it seems like you're working in that area as far as efficiencies go.
yeah. Yeah, I think you captured it well, Mike. And, the healthcare sector in general has largely been resilient to changes in economic climate, if you will, geopolitical climate, right? In inflation and the recessions previously, but now it's actually very directly impacted by them more than it has ever been. So
Yes.
the problem of not just performance and productivity, but engagement is ever so real right now. No matter what pharma or biotech company you analyze, or whether what startup you form, whether or not it has two people or it has 2,000, I think the communication aspect and measuring how well you're doing, how relevant is the information that you're sharing, how timely is it, across different departments or boundaries, and how you can maybe stretch those boundaries and also provide more accountability to not just your customers, but also to each other and to society as a whole. Right now, there's a trend of large pharma companies, especially having ESG, right? Environmental, social, and governance requirements.
Right.
And investors are also putting their money into these non-financial types of deliverables and structures. And so similarly, medical, even though it's not financial, it's not revenue generating, we need to understand how to translate that customer experience, the patient satisfaction with the employee experience. In healthcare systems, that employee experience is uh, physician retention, right? So because it's not just in pharma biotech that we're experiencing these problems, but in the healthcare systems where you have a lot of physicians, a lot of healthcare professionals who are moving into pharma, and we stand to gain from that real world clinical experience in pharma and biotech. However, who is going to be there to really treat those patients? We need to really reach out to more diverse communities. The medical schools, in terms of the medical school capacity, is also limited, and so there are many different tactics that we need to consider in the healthcare system in general. Speaking of communication, also, as patient goes from one hospital to another, right? Their records, even though we have improved our technology, right? Electronic medical records, those records don't move with them. They stay with that system. And so that's the problem with continuity of care and communication, as you mentioned, within the healthcare system, which is which is creating this problem that's incredibly like arcane, because electronic medical records have been introduced to the United States decades ago, but we haven't made much real progress. So democratizing that data, the patient records, making patients actually own them, I think would be a very important step. And then insurance is the other part that I should cover. Healthcare payers, right? Large healthcare plans, they are also
Yeah,
interested in making sure that the quality of care is at its highest, right? That it's continuous, right? And that that the members of the healthcare plans have access to the most innovative treatments, right? Because I don't think that a patient, when they move from a job to job, which has increased more and more within pharma or within every industry, they need to worry about the quality of care for the next physician that they're going to see and the next
yeah,
health
the
provider.
changes they have to put
The
up with,
changes that
just
right,
changing jobs and how that
every
affects,
year.
people, how that affects
Yeah.
people. Let me ask you a little bit about, what your thoughts are about the profit motive that's in different areas of the health field, and what you have seen internationally, how other, countries are there other countries that we could model after, that we can learn from? Or do we actually have the best because we have a lot of innovation that happens in this country, but we
Yes.
have a very high cost of the deliverables that's happening, and why there's so much pressure for the government to try and lower prices by enforcing new laws to make that happen, and how that's going to affect investments into research, that whole thing. So I wanted to know a little bit about if there's other countries out there that we could learn from. What do you think?
Sure, sure. So the short answer, I guess, is that I'll share some of the countries that I would say are those to be emulated: Slovenia, Denmark, Finland. These are three countries in which healthcare data is more accessible, and the health equity is probably highest
I see.
based on experts in the field that I've spoken to and I've interviewed as well. In terms of the quality of healthcare, there's an expert, a global expert, that's also an advisor of Amadev Pharma, Dr. Rashad Massoud. He's traveled in over 100 different countries and has some amazing, incredible case studies of success of implementing different programs and their outcomes on improving quality of care. And one of the biggest differences is that we tend to spend a lot more in the last few years of a patient's life here in the United States. So those rescue medications, at that point, healthcare does become a cost. Okay, so what if you were to invest more earlier on in preventive medications? Right. So the question that I'm constantly pondering about is that, yeah, we have a lot of innovation, a lot of rare disease companies that are popping up everywhere, and yes, we need to treat those. We need to those treatments, but what do we do with preventing care with screening someone with type 1 diabetes early with antibodies that they may form early or genetic screening. That takes a lot of investment, but that's preventative. And that's why there's somewhat of a problem. That's why that debate is going on in the United States with the IRA, right? Where the access to those blood pressure medications is important at a lower cost for those who have the Medicaid, right? And the government coverage. But at the same time, if there's an appropriate amount is allocated to screening earlier on, you can conceivably decrease the inefficient ways that you know that finances are spent in healthcare in the United States comparatively, let's say, to other. Because we spend, I mentioned the 20% of the GDP in the United States is spent on healthcare. Comparatively speaking to other countries, that's twice more. That's double the proportion of healthcare in other countries. If you speak to, let's say, the CEO of Bayer, Stefan Ulrich, he'll say that if you, those economies that invest in their health will also have a healthier economy. Okay, so
Well, one
right,
follows the other. Yeah.
yeah, one follows the other. And in terms of the drug costs, the drug treatment, pharmaceutical industry, there's a lot of research that's coming from some of the best academic centers in Europe. Okay, that we are benefiting from here in the United States as well. But I mean, the overall relationship of healthcare to GDP, they're spending less in considerably, but on the drugs, they're spending about the same, about 8% globally. The proportion of the healthcare spend that's contributed by new treatments, medications, it's about the same. And so the question may be is, are we being as efficient in administrative costs? There's data also to suggest that patients are demanding more treatments than ever before, but a lot of them are unnecessary. The recent studies that have surveyed thousands of physicians are showing that physicians themselves, they say that that they often prescribe treatments that they would otherwise consider unnecessary because number one, they're afraid of being sued. But the second highest reason is 59% is because the patients demanded them. And there's other kind of factors, but it's a complex question in terms of DTC. For example, in Europe, rest of the world, you don't have direct to consumer advertising to the same extent you do here.
Do you think that adds to the demand? What they see on TV, oh, I've got that problem, I need that. And of course, the pharma is making their money off those ads. They're not running those ads for and spending that money without reason.
Right.
But it seems like when there's a third party making the payment that has no mind of it costing really the patient anything, when you divide that up, it seems like the sky's the limit then. And it's really not. We all pay for it, and it affects the whole system rather than just an individual.
Hmm.
I don't know what
Yeah.
the answer would be
Yeah.
due to
Me
that sort of
neither.
thing. But let
Right.
me
It's
ask you
difficult.
another question about holistic medicine.
Mhm.
Because if a lot of people are showing up when they really don't have a reason, they don't need it, but they're being demanded to have something, and then they're filling out the prescriptions because it's the customer, their patient, wants it. Could there be some solutions in holistic medicine that could actually serve those people and get them a little bit away from demanding things they don't actually need? You know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 I think what you're probably alluding to is the registration and the regulatory climate of various different medical treatments here in the United States versus others. There's a very high bar that's set in terms of the numbers of clinical studies that you need in order to approve medications here. All right. Now we have an emergence of software even as a medical device, either in
Oh,
combination or alone. But complementary medicine and holistic medicine, they, as long as they are studied in clinical studies, right, that are robust, that are randomized, or that may have may be accelerated due to real world studies, due to genetic twins that are used now, or digital twins as they call it. Sorry, not genetic, but digital twins, or decentralizing data such that you're collecting data from clinical trial participants in real time or in registries. That's what
Mhm.
uh, I think it's in general, um, we need more research, and I think the point that you're raising is that if we can accelerate R&D using technology, as we now have seen multiple cases of drugs that are being discovered now, that are by using AI, such as in silico medicine, rare
Mhm.
conditions such as idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. There is already a fully AI designed medication, and it takes 10 years for a drug to be approved, $2.6 billion, and 90 to 99% of the drug candidates never really make it to the clinical stage. The humans. So the whole metric system is broken in R&D, and those are the words of not just myself and Amada Pharma, but that's also comes from Sanofi, or Sanofi, their chief scientific officer, uh, Frank Nessel. And because we don't back translate to see where did we fail, maybe with which of these candidate molecules did we fail in? We tended to throw them away, or we didn't share them with other companies. But what the pandemic and the last few years have brought about has been something that I'm encouraged by. That I've seen this trend of pharmaceutical companies coming together and not conceding their proprietary information or intellectual property, which is of utmost, of course, importance in this regulated and closed industry, but they're
Mhm.
actually sharing their databases, their drug target interaction databases together. And I'll give you an example. It's called Melody. With the two L's and two D's. Melody is a
Okay.
and it's a new consortium in which is a shared database with the intention of accelerating R&D, really, with these 10 companies, 10 large companies that are just sharing all of their potential candidates in various different ways that they could interact with their tissues, drug target interactions in which there has been a deficit, in private and public databases. AI is helping, but also just bringing all of these databases together can hopefully, you know, accelerate, can bring these markets and improve health equity, really, as
It
well.
seems like a great system there, Tim, because it's kind of like doing open source software in a sense.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
comparable to that. They're willing to share that information, which of course can lead to some successful outcomes. Uh, yeah, yeah, I think that's a brilliant move as far as what they're trying to accomplish. And you maybe get more into a shared cost type of thing when it comes to the investments into research because of that. It's a
Mhm.
kind of where you may be lowering that cost because it's more of a cost sharing thing of putting all the data together and sharing it, but
Yeah.
yet still protecting what you call their IP properties,
Yeah.
because that's where they're going to make their money and be protected for a few years before before it goes generic, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And the technology
Uh,
is called federated learning models. So
oh,
federated learning is the concept that actually preserves the IP, but allows more communication of databases and interoperability. And speaking
well,
of collaboration between companies, Mike, in 2020, of all the drug launches, only 32% were co-developed by more than one company, and that percentage grew to 46% the following year, which is a 50% increase of companies understanding that they're going to need, another partner in order to bring a drug to the market. Now, how they do that when they integrate is another story. And as Astellas' president, for example, Astellas is a quite big mid-sized and large pharma company, and they had a 50-50% deal with a smaller company which is a much smaller pharmaceutical company, but the decision making power was actually equal. Well, equal. It was not. It wasn't related, or it wasn't. It didn't correspond to the size of the, or the difference of the size of the company, and so that was a true partnership that Estelis's president recently spoke about at Financial Times, um, eh, where you have the passion, you have that sense of urgency from a smaller company, and you have the structure, and if you can, if you don't just you know, if you don't just have a company centric view, but have a patient centric view as well, and if you merge them together, well, in the CEO from his own words, I think that is very much aligned to, or that can predict more probability of success. And that's
Isn't this
also
kind
my understanding of Amadea Pharma. That's one of the reasons why we measure performance and behavior using this medical productivity index that I've been writing about and speaking about.
this is combining resources. This
Yeah.
is a way to combine resources. So whether you're a small company working with a bigger company that's got the greater resources,
Right.
they're both helping each other bring to bear solutions much
Mhm.
faster and maybe even
Yeah.
at a lower cost. It's just another way to try and arrive and get there and make it happen. Could you take a minute here or two to talk about the type of companies that Amadea helps? Well, the
Sure.
people that you like to connect with, that you can really give them the benefits of, and features of just what Amadea does for them and how it can help them move forward quickly.
Sure. Sure. I think we all compete for information, for technology, for talent.
Yeah.
But I am a strong believer that innovation starts with competition, then it continues with collaboration, and it ultimately ends with next generation treatments, devices for patients. And I am interested in connecting with types of leaders who realize that we are in a very competitive ecosystem. And in order to stay competitive and relevant, we need to design the contests that matter. The types of contests that matter in order to translate our, the effort and the quality into business outcomes. Okay, that will that will that will be understood, as numbers rather than pictures, because pictures leave too much for interpretation.
Yeah.
Okay, so and you need numbers in order to be transparent in today's environment, and so uh, organizations within life sciences, so pharma and biotech executives, operations executives. Operations is really where I have really spent the last 5 years. Types of clients that I've had have ranged from small to startup to large pharma uh, companies, as well as nonprofit organizations within life sciences, as well as AI and NLP, natural language processing companies, technology tech companies that wanted to enter the life science market. Now, the other types of executives besides, let's say, CEOs, chief commercial officers, or chief operating officers, or chief medical officers at these companies are also healthcare plan executives. So Optum Health,
Yeah.
those types of companies that in whose its best interest it is to monitor and to deliver high quality of care, continuity of care, to patients, and also to to manage the patient's conditions and communicate to their own members of their uh, healthcare plans, for example. So uh, I think we can utilize data science in ways that are far beyond what is currently being done, simply because of how busy we are with our work, trying to do more with less within healthcare. But we need a different third party, or we need somebody with a fresh kind of approach to actually analyze how it is that we innovate, not what we do to innovate. Because look, I've been there myself, where I've tried to evaluate my own contribution, my own activities. But when I'm asked to go in 10, 20 different directions, then my recall is not as accurate. The integrity of the data suffers, as does the predictability and the ultimate translation of that data into
Ah,
outcomes, right? And so you need to devote full focus into operations, and do it in a way that that approaches the rigor that we use in clinical trials, in which we try to measure something as abstract as pain using a visual analog score that's validated over time. Yet
right.
we don't know how to measure our own employees or ourselves or our own activities using that same rigor because we think that it's too abstract. Amida Pharma has found, a an approach to translate th- those kinds of abstract, unspoken needs and activities into mathematical types of formulas and into numbers. Because look, if you observe, not just pain in clinical trials or even something as abstract as music, right? You're not able to replicate your masterpiece until you really translate that music into notes, into sheet, into notes, into the rhythm and counts, right? And so we need to find a better rhythm to business internally to increase performance and engagement as well. And we've never really had more ways to do that, yet higher deficit than today, unfortunately. And that's what we're trying to
Mm,
solve.
yeah, it's this transposing into notes, transposing information looks to be a a core issue of getting through that, and to clarify everything from communication to engagement, the whole 9 yards. There's one thing that you said earlier. You were talking about the involvement of your interest in sports teams and what
Yes.
makes an A player versus a B player, and where that goes. I think that has a lot to do with old age. What happens in the fact that we have 80% of costs pushed into old age, where that's where a lot of the medical costs are just inflating like crazy. How do we go back and look at the sports model and get people to lead a lifetime habits of good health practice, between the nutrition and the exercise and knowing what their blood levels are, what's going on within their body? Because it looks like the whole industry is starting to move into individualistic medicine,
Yep.
customized to the individual. So there's a lot of that, and AI is certainly looking to help a lot of that. But
Sure.
are there any ideas you can think off the top of your head here about how do we get that education? What assets need to be brought to the front to invest in the younger generation to help them build the habits that lead to lowering the cost of old age?
Yeah.
It's
Well,
it's kind of a
it's
conundrum
really,
conundrum. Yeah.
it's really, I think it starts with the word education, like you mentioned, and education that's multidisciplinary, that doesn't just involve the physician, but also team, a team of leaders, caregivers, nurses, pharmacists who are very trusted as well, in the healthcare team. But also, it starts as early as in food cafeterias, for example. If you look at the ingredients, okay, the numbers of ingredients and artificial flavors that are used in these enticing packages for kids, right? That and the costs that we're trying to save in school cafeterias and the downstream you effects that they cause. I think you can start as early as in the educational systems. In fact, I know a CEO of a nonprofit, Nora Latore, who I'll mention here,
Good break.
who started her own organization called Eat Real, right? So a lot of it is actually comes from our habits, our eating habits, even, or fitness, or working remotely. understanding, how it is that, we've really never been in higher, deficit, or in a larger need. We've never had a larger need for being more inspired. Innovators, to me, the true innovators are in the business of inspiration. They have to, kind of inspire those opposing forces that kind of say, okay, well, innovation is not for me. It's for those decision makers out there, or we need to do more with less. We can't afford innovation, or, you know, innovation is not our strategy. We've come this far, right? Why do we need to go elsewhere? Right. But what got you here won't get you necessarily, will get you there, won't get you there, right?
Exactly.
As
Yeah,
Gary Hamel says, right? And so I think you need to, we need to understand how to kind of transform, even our work ways of working, from just going to work in order to, pay the bills, or going to work because, that's what you have as an option, to going to work as as a playground, right? A playground of competition, gamification, but more certainty. You create more certainty, uh, through that sportsmanship, where sportsmanship is valued at the same level as a performance. So sportsmanship, or behavior, at 50% as performance. And so in fact, I created the first ever Pharma Innovation Olympics. My company, Amadeo Pharma, we ran an event last year. It was a global event. It was a global event with Astellas, Takeda, Roche participating, as well as other startups. And it created economic opportunities. It changed how we provided feedback, because unlike in sales, Mike, or marketing, medical professionals, they're not used to receiving feedback all the time, or being evaluated numerically, for example, on their activities. But I changed all that, in this Innovation Olympics event last year. And I what we saw was expert judges from 19 expert judges from 12 different companies, executives. Okay. They provided a feedback, and they changed their mind. And it wasn't just a pitch competition, but in the live debates, when they voted, only the last vote counted, not the first few series of votes. And you saw how a company that was a startup ended up edging out a larger pharma company at the end, when they had multiple chances to present their ideas, or different forms of their ideas, which they kept their IP as according, according to the rules of the event. However, they are dared to share a little bit more than they did before, and I'm like, I'm really excited about the event also this
yeah.
year. So I
Well, you
invite
are
those who
continuing.
yes, I'm
Yeah,
going to
good.
continue it this year. Yes,
Perfect.
as well. Yeah.
Yes.
So the registration starts in June, and the event will start in September. So
No,
it's gonna,
you've
yeah.
grabbed onto something that's kind of like the tail wagging the dog there, where you're going to be able to affect change.
Yes,
That's
yes. I think the
fantastic.
data should inspire. Data should inspire, rather than report the past alone. So,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, so that's our approach to data at Amadea Pharma.
Well, this is how you're contributing, and it's all about communication and streamlining efficiencies, how to work together, how to create a wealth for the pharma to have the money to be able to get the research done. When it comes to the education side, on the patient side of things, uh, I kind of lean towards selling the idea about continued physical activity in a way where, I hate to say it, but people respond to fear more than they do the other. In other words, if you're talking about a gain, you'll gain something that's not as important as the fear of loss. It's just the way humans are. So I think the storyline, as far as education, has to go. Do you want to feel as lively as you are today when you're 40, when you're 50, when you're 80? Because if you keep these habits, you're going to have the body of a teenager compared to other people around you. So the fear is kind of underneath that, that if I don't do this, I'm going to end up all messed up at the end of my life. And I'm working towards the end of my life to have something where I can retire. And they're thinking about that a lot of times, especially when they start getting their 30s, how to save, how to, really get serious about it. But they're looking at the monetary side and not the physical the side of just being alive and getting out there, rolling their feet into the sand and feeling the ground. And you know what I think what I'm trying to say is to stay within the natural line of things. And then the big thing that you brought up was nutrition, the education about nutrition, and looking to that the big companies are going to have to change their mindset about the type of ingredients and what they're putting into things to improve the American physical situation right now, where we have so many obese people. And that, of course, is going to lead to older generation just not being able to take care of themselves and not having a good quality of life. We know that. We're seeing it now, and the high cost of what it takes to keep them going. It's not sustainable. So
Yeah.
something's, I think, got to be done on that level, because that money could be spread out in a whole different way. And the research doesn't need to be starved. It could be, move at a much faster pace because it's enriched with how the resources where money is being spent. So we can solve, I think, the aging problem of sickness, of just being in bad health. It comes from the nutrition side that you were talking about as much as it does the physical side of physical activity. And
Yep.
and how do we tell the story? I don't think we're adequately telling the story for the younger generation, so they don't end up, the 40-year-olds now are obese. They're only 25 years away, 30 years away, that
Yeah.
kind of thing, and they're in trouble now. How do we turn that corner? I think it's going to take leadership from the government all the way up to the president uh, to tell a story that's going to work, because it'll
Yeah.
make what you're doing in pharma so much more effective if we can attack that problem along with everything
Right.
we're doing in the middle field. I want to thank you, Tim, for the time today to lay out what you're doing and what your goals are and how you're helping the life sciences and that whole industry and the medical industry gel together better, and looking at the other examples of countries that have a little bit more right than we do, that maybe we do need to emulate a bit to make some changes. So I think you're riding the wave out there, and you're going to make a big difference in the future, Tim, as you already are. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike. It's been a pleasure and honor to speak to you today.
You bet.